15-year-old Kyle Murdoch had been planning it for months, standing tall proud over all the guns he acquired to no hint of emotion on his face. He was going to make every other school shooting look like a frickin' joke. He couldn't wait to see all the kids run around like baby chicks being chased by a hungry fox. He couldn't wait to see the looks on their stupid faces as they bled to death, and the utter disbelief of knowing that they were going to die, and Kyle was the one responsible for the eventual departure from this stupid planet. Kyle didn't really have any reason for planning the dastardly deed. No one picked on him. No one ever said anything mean to him. No one ever paid him any attention. He just felt like doing it. Well, come tomorrow he was going to be all they thought about. The teen then gathered some weapons and hid them under his bed. Out of sight, he only knew where they were. He then crawled into bed without a care in the world. He didn't even care if he lived or died tomorrow. His main goal was to kill the ma'am and his nerds, jocks, etc. teachers as possible tomorrow. He closed his eyes and was out in a matter of minutes. He didn't dream, only darkness surrounded his mind. Kyle's heart skipped a beat. What time was it that he gave up? Time to wreak havoc on this shitty town? Nope. He only opened his up to find that the light belonged to a flashlight. A flashlight attached to a gun that reminded him of an MP5. Kyle was confused at first, but as his mind slowly began to defog, he realized what was happening. Beyond the light was a dark figure, wearing a helmet of some kind of tactical outfit. The jig was up. Someone had snitched on him and called the police. His plan ruined. He was led away in handcuffs, passed by his upset and scared parents. He swore he'd get revenge. Shooting up the school was too easy. He knew he was going to end up in some kind of prison. God help this miserable world should he ever escape. Now he just didn't want to kill his classmates. He wanted to kill everyone. A few more weeks later after the clash, the clear, crisp blue sky was a stark contrast of the dirty, wrecked, destruction-ridden town that was once calm and peaceful. Now it looked like the tornado had gone through. Cars were overturned, windows were shattered, some buildings were burned down, leaving the charred remains of once served a purpose. The banks, restaurants, offices, family fun centers, they used to be someone's livelihood. They used to be places where people could go and hang out and have fun and live their lives. Now they're abandoned and forlorn, begging the question if things would ever go back to normal. Whenever that would be. Normal meaning no more killer adults. What would become of these places? Would there be nothing more than monuments forever when life was simple? When the kids didn't have to fight people and built those places, people that loved them and told them that they would always protect them. That was the question every kid wondered if they had been lived long enough to see. Currently, the only sound in Royal Woods was the sound of small footsteps coming from a small group of 10 kids and calls of crows that hovered over the air like a bad omen. Heck, even everything was a bad omen. The dry bloodstains on the ground, the rotting bodies of the young and old, and in fact, the local Waffle House was closed permanently. One kid, however, failed to take notice. Instead, he breathed in the air and exhaled like a person on a fresh-aired commercial, sucking in air as if it was clean and not filled with death. "Did you smell that? That is the smell of new beginnings," the boy said, raising his arms over his shoulder and turning to face the other kids who were with him. "Are you sure it's not just your weed?" another kid replied sarcastically. "I wish," he responded. "I ran out of that stuff weeks ago, and the only thing I got now left is high on the life." The brown-haired, slightly short but athletic girl was the head of the group that hushed him. "You don't want to draw any of them out, do you?" The kid shrugged. "They've only shown their green, ugly faces by now. I think we're safe." "For now," another kid said, who was also near the front of the group, responded. "You can never be too certain, and you can never live your life constantly on the edge over everything. Take a moment to smell the flowers. High on life," kid responded. "What flowers?" a random kid asked. "I don't know. I'm pretty sure they're around here somewhere. You just gotta maintain a positive attitude and keep searching." "I wish I had your positive attitude, Shade." Another boy that was in front of the group had shaved his head and said. The boy whose name was Shade Walker smiled. The only person who is stopping you from getting a little attitude is yourself, Brock. Brock shrugged. I gotta be constantly worried. Can't get to lax as leader, you know. Even lowering my guard can prove fatal. All it takes is one mistake to screw everything up. Is that how you really want to live, though? Shade asked, as if it means to get everyone else to listen, and yes. A plastic bag scattered on the ground, blown by the light breeze. Some kids stopped and froze as they first emerged, but then chastified themselves as once they were nearly startled by something that was normally used by carry-on groceries. Brock's right, another kid spoke up. A kid wearing brown, hoodless jacket, wielding a club that made his weapon of choice after ditching the hammer that he was so fond of. No one knew his real name. Everyone just called him Speck. All it takes are those things. One smart one to organize a group and launch an attack. If it happens, we may not be as lucky as last time. Well, they should get to better than to fuck with us, the girl in front of the group said without any showing of emotion on her face, just pure determination. She was clutching a spike club that resembled a baseball bat and scanned the area, daring anything to jump out and attack her. Her name was Lynn Loud, and at her 4 feet, 11 inches, weighing just over 100 pounds, she was not one to be messed with. All, her brawn was more than up for her size, and if you mess with any of the siblings, you'd be lucky to walk away with a black eye and a few missing teeth. All of us combined probably have killed more than the entire population of Royal Woods. Whatever that was an extra aggravation yet to be seen, that fact still remained. They had killed more than their fair share of grown-ups. More where they were more comfortable with. One of the worst parts was the restless nights they had battled up the large army of grown-ups. Every living soul in Royal Woods had pretty much committed a relationship with PTSD, and countless times kids had woken up screaming was evidence of that. Several kids decided to go to sleep in different rooms of Royal Woods Elementary School because they felt they couldn't be woken up 20 times a night. There were a few more than 50 surviving kids at the school. None of them had decided to leave the school and go live somewhere else. They hadn't encountered a dangerous adult in weeks, just the occasional straggler. Even then, you cannot be too careful around them. Even near dead shark will bite up to his last breath. The group reached the intersection. Speck knew where they were. They knew they were near his dad's hunting shop, and Speck recalled when he was being chased off by a large adult with a sledgehammer, the tower as he was called. He had been forced to abandon the shop and all the useful items that were still inside. Guns, knives, food, hunting supplies, all gone because Speck had dropped the key, and they were unable to find it the few times he had recalled returned there in the weeks of the following battle with the large horde of Greens. As the grown-ups recalled, he figured it was gone forever. Maybe it was for the best. He didn't think he would go back there and face his dad's corpse. Speck had no hope that no other kids had been forced to kill their parents. "Heads up," someone said. As everyone looked to see a Green straggling on the road, it looked more like a walker from The Walking Dead than one of the intelligent Greens that could move agilely and wield weapons was a good sign. Lynn looked around. A lot of the kids seemed hesitant to approach the Green, while the others looked to her, as if she's solely responsible for taking it out. After what she said a few moments ago, she then met her older sister Luna's gaze. She was looking at her expectantly well. There was a hint of smirk at the corners of her mouth. Luna was only with the group because Lynn had eagerly agreed to go with the volunteers to the danger zone to look for supplies too. Lynn may have been tougher and stronger, but Luna was her older sister, and anytime she was outside, her older sister would definitely be at her side, just as a few weeks ago. When Brock led the expedition to the farm, she was the only sibling that was with her at that moment, as the others were back at the school, safe and sound. "Well," Luna said. The grin was now evident on her freckled, slightly dirty face. It had been days since her or anyone had access to decent shower. The elementary school they had stayed at didn't have any showers, and if someone was really desperate to clean themselves, they have to use the water from the sink or go to one of the nearby houses to try and use showers, and no one was that frantic. Her dark brown hair had grown out of its pixie cut stage, thus giving the appearance of a teenage boy either in the late 1970s or the early 80s. Lynn shrugged. "Don't mind if I do," she said. She began to walk up to the green like a person going up during a baseball game. "Be careful," Brock said, as the young jock hesitantly, yet cautiously, made her way over to the adult. If she had heard him, she didn't acknowledge it. The green slowly turned to her was a scrawny male with a long beard and overalls. There was no urgency in its movement, as if it were turning to unseen noise rather than someone who was about to bash its head in. Lynn readied herself and the green lowered its head and reached out towards her, lunging at the snail's pace. She swung her bat as much as she could as the green spiraling away. Lynn readied herself as the green lowered its head. "Home run!" she yelled. Everyone hushed her, but she ignored it and walked briskly back towards him. "What? Afraid that I might attract more of them?" She smiled. "Good. This isn't a game, Lynn," Brock said sternly. Lynn just shrugged again. "Whatever you say." Brock sighed and told everyone to continue on. They were almost at their destination. Luna put a hand on Lynn's shoulder. "Nice battin', sis." Lynn smiled. It was nothing. Which half was true? Sure, there were things that were no longer human, but maybe Brock was right. This wasn't a game. These things used to be human. Lynn wondered how she'd feel if someone went up to her father and yelled her "four" before hitting him with a golf club. For an example, she wouldn't let herself get carried away, but at the one time it felt like a means of escape. Everyone had their coping mechanism. For hers just happened to be treating everything like a game. Her friend Cooper appeared beside her now, wielding a baseball bat with nails driven into it. He was wearing a red t-shirt with black basketball pants and white basketball sneakers that were brand only a few months ago, but they were now stained with dark green from the constant exposure to dirt, trash, and blood, and he had a smirk on his face. "You have come to compliment my skills as well," she said, meeting him with a smirk of her own. "Kind of," he said. "Well, good job." "It was nothing," she repeated. "The killing of something with the club was no big deal. It was like swatting a fly." "That's the kind of thing I wanted to talk about," Cooper said, his tone changing slightly down serious. "Huh?" she said, genuinely curious. "Well," he began, "after all the things we've done with the grown-ups we've killed, do you think if things will ever go back to normal? Like, do you think when it's all over?" Lynn raised an eyebrow and turned to Luna, who was listening in on the conversation. She had a perplexed look on her face, and the Jacques turned back to the black boy and said, "If I learned from anything from my 13 years of being alive, that it's nothing truly ends. That our lives are a never-ending of series of seasons, years, and sagas. As soon as one thing ends, another thing begins. It could be a person or an event. We always gotta be prepared. The world won't end until the very last minute the Greens are dead. Even if we all manage to accomplish that, we're gonna have to work on rebuilding society. Think how long it's taken humanity to get us where I was. I was talking machines, medicines, electronics, all that crap that made us do top dog, separated from us from animals. At this point we might as well be caveman, because that's where we are now. Okay, maybe not that far back in the Stone Age, because we have tools and knowledge, but no adults to implement them, just us kids." "Dang, sis," Luna said. "That's rather profound of you." Lynn shrugged. "Give me that one more credit. I have matured pretty quickly the last few months." Cooper spoke up again. "I just want this to be over with, you know. I want to focus on being a kid. I want to goof off, but it looks like it's not going to happen. Not today, not tomorrow or next week, not even next year. I'm going to have to make peace with the fact that my childhood innocence is over, and I'm pretty much an adult now. No parents or teachers to tell me what to do. Seeing as the disease has affected 16 and older, I could very well be a senior citizen." Lynn chuckled. "You don't even look that old to me." Cooper scoffed. "I felt like I've aged 100 of years over the past 2 weeks. I mean, how long has it been? 1 month? 2 months? We could all be past life average expectancy now." Lynn shook her head. "I don't plan on dying anytime soon." Their destination was begin to come into view. Royalwood Supermarket was called Supermart, and the parking lot was still filled with cars that once belonged to shoppers who were most likely going on about their day, unaware that meteor was about to change anything. None of the cars seemed useful, and the kids wondered if they would be able to find a way to make them useful again. The meteor rendered them useless and unable to work. One thing they used for cars the last month or so was making car bombs that played a huge part in defeating that horde several weeks ago. Wow, no one could ever believe they were able to pull that off. The adults outnumbered the kids and most of them had beat. But the kids that were smarter had better weapons. No doubt if Speck didn't kill the adult he claimed he was in charge of the horde, none of them would be alive. Now they were standing in front of the doors of the supermarket, and they all shattered the glass and littered the ground. There were dried up spots on the ground and jagged shards and red footprints leading the way from the doors. There were no footprints leading to the store that had meant it was safe, right? Luna and Lynn remembered the last time they were there. Lincoln had convinced their mom to let him do the shopping so he could buy the cereal called Zombie brand. Zombie. And they all found out he was going to decide to accompany them. The thing was, when the boy and his 9 sisters were involved, something was yet as simple as a trip to the grocery store ended up in an escapade. Lincoln was just trying to get some cereal, but his sisters caused some commotion and ended up getting them all banned from the store. Of course, they all felt bad and prevented Lincoln from getting a zombie brand after he worked so hard to save enough money for it. They all went out and got some. Standing back of the store, no adults in sight, it was nice knowing that there was no one to stop them from entering, not even a vigilant store manager. Brock banged his weapon on the metal bat against the doorframe and the automatic doors. The sound reverberated eerily quiet store. Shade shouted as his voice echoing throughout the store as well. Some kids hushed him while the others snickered. "I guess it's empty," Brock said. He threw a glance over his shoulder and the others. He put up a tough and fearless front, but everyone knew there was no way you could walk into a new, uncharted location without feeling nervous. It was light outside the store, but it had plenty of dark places to hide. He took out a flashlight and stepped through the automatic doors, and the rest followed the few steps behind. He shone a flashlight all over the place, and the white orb chasing the shadows away. Something didn't seem right about the place. Speck walked beside him. "You notice something off about this?" Brock asked, as the kid was wearing a brown hoodless jacket, despite that it was fairly warm outside. "Yeah," Speck said. "Nothing's out of order. Despite the floors being stained with blood and some debris of clothing and bones, all the shelves are neatly stocked with food. They expected to be packed clean, but instead, not a single item was taken out of this place." "That's weird, dude," Luna said. "Who would take the time to keep this place organized?" "I don't know," Brock said. "I bet it's because that disease struck in the blink of the eye. No one had a chance to loot it or anything like that." It made sense. This was their first time heading back there since the world went crazy, which no one had ever been there since the start as well. Why would there be not any greens in sight? Maybe even the ones they did look like they had eaten in quite a while. "I say we're gonna get things good," Shade said. "There's no telling when we'll find a place this stacked again." Brock agreed and went over to the shopping cart rack and picked one out. Everyone split into groups, get a cart filled with many non-perishable food items and whatever else they'll find useful, and meet back once it's full. Everyone nodded and went to their business. The store was big, but it wasn't big enough into splitting into small groups would be too dangerous. Luna, Lynn, and Cooper picked a cart amongst themselves and went over to the aisle near the end of the store, close to the produce section. The stench was coming from rotten meat was awful, but it wasn't the worst smell to ever fill their nostrils. The horrible amounts of smell that resulted in communication with hundreds, if not thousands, of dead bodies that surrounded the school once the clash of the hordes of grown-ups had ended. "What are we doing here?" Cooper asked. "I don't know." It was Lynn who answered. "I guess it was just an old habit. Whenever my mom would take me and my family here, I'd always go to the meat section. Gotta have that, protein." "Well, it looks like it's not going to be a while until we can have a chance to eat meat again," Cooper said. Then he looked down somberly. It's gonna be a while before we get a chance to eat a lot of the foods that we took for granted. Lynn had put her hands on her hips and nodded slowly. A small group of the free girls walked past them. I don't know what you expect to find one here, but one of them stopped and said, "It's rotten, can you tell?" The trio met the gaze. "I know," Lynn said. "I just want to make sure." "I don't mean to sound impudent," the girl went on, "but it's a long time since without electricity. Anyone in half a brain would know that meat lasts long by sell by date." She then had a smirk on her face at the end of the sentence as Lynn wanted to wipe off that with her fist. The young jock met her gaze, and the girl looked familiar. She tried to place her face. "It's Stacy, right?" Luna asked. The girl nodded. Now Lynn remembered this girl showed up in high school when Brock had saved them. Luna continued. "Then what are you doing back here?" "I'm just gonna go look in the back room," she said. "There's bound to be lots of food back here." "Well, maybe if you should just go in doing that, okay? Hey, just don't worry about us." Now it was Luna who had the smallest smirks on her face. Stacy's face dropped. She looked like she wanted to say something else, but instead tipped her head along with the rest of the girls that were with her. Luna waited until the sound of the shopping cart as Stacy was pushing and was out of earshot before turning to Lynn. "Is it just me? Or does it feel like some people have it out for us?" Lynn shrugged. "Don't let it bother you. People will always be hating." "Why would Stacy have it out for you?" Cooper asked. "People don't exactly hold us up high in regard," Luna answered. "I wouldn't be surprised if someone told her about some of the things that happened over the past few weeks before Brock's group showed up." Cooper began to wonder, was she referring to the fact that her younger sister Lana had gotten out of kids killed when she led them on that fatal strike against the adults? No, why would Stacy give a crap about that? "I think you're just paranoid," she finally said. "Pretty sure everyone is just paranoid," Luna answered. Then she began to push the cart onto another aisle when she stopped when something caught her eye. She smiled. Lynn noticed this. "What?" she asked. Then she looked to see what her older sister was fixed on. She didn't know how to feel about it. They were in the aisle with the alcoholic beverage section. Luna looked over to see a bottle of Jack Daniels and held it up. Steadying it, the bottle had a security cap on it, but Luna was sure she could figure out a way to remove it. "What are you doing?" Cooper asked accusingly. "What?" Luna asked innocently. "People are going to need to unwind somehow. Plus, I hate to see such good alcohol go to waste." "But you can't drink alcohol," Cooper said. "Says who?" Luna smirked. Cooper opened his mouth to speak, but nothing had came out. Luna watched her older sister put the bottle of alcohol in the cart. She always suspected Luna had been drinking, even before the world had changed. The nights that she spent out with her friends, all the time she came home late at night and she stumbled up the stairs like walking to them, was the hardest thing in the world. Most of the time, she wouldn't even bother just to crash on the couch, and it was her sisters who tried to confront her about it. She would just deny it and sudden high-pitched scream filled the entire store. It sounded like it came from a different room. The three kids snapped their heads towards that all at once frozen. Lynn gripped her spike club tight, and Cooper raised his bat. Luna grabbed her weapon and a hatchet, and forgot all about the Jack Daniels bottle she was holding. They saw Brocky briskly rush past them into the aisle, and followed by a few kids, who didn't seem to have the confidence. That gave Lynn the instinctive that she needed. She quickly bounded after them. Luna dropped her bottle of alcohol. It broke, but it didn't shatter. And at least her younger sister, Cooper, followed as well. Brock was at the set of double doors that led to the back rooms coming from the store. He stormed through and was met with great darkness. He shone a flashlight over to where he heard the commotion, and was greeted with a sight of bloodied body coming from towards him. He raised his back but quickly realized it was a girl. It was one of the girls that regrouped with Stacy. Her name was Nina. She was wearing all white clothes and were stained with red, and she had a crazy look in her eyes. "Nina," he called out and went to her. She collapsed in his arms. "What happened?" She was sobbing. Tears were streaming down her face, washing away all the blood that was seeping through her wound on her forehead. She lifted up a weak, trembling hand towards something. Brock didn't look to see a body being dragged away. By now, more kids entered the back room. Brock gingerly helped Nina up and led her to name the other kids. Take her outside and look for a first aid kit or something. He then took the few kids in particular. They nodded and led Nina away. Brock angrily looked back in the direction they'd seen the body being dragged away and gripped his bat. "We should get out of here," Shade said, taking a few steps back. "No," Brock simply said. Nina wasn't alone. Stacy and Bria were with her too, and they could need her help. He looked at everyone, and they had 12 kids that had gone with them on this expedition, a 13-year-old altogether. Nina and 2 kids were away. Stacy and Bria were missing, so that meant 8 of them were against an unseen enemy. They all looked unsure, and he tried to see who could be the least scared. Speck looked eager to help, and so did Lynn. He asked Speck and Lynn to follow him, and they both agreed. "I'll help too," Luna stepped in. "Same here," Cooper then added. Brock then nodded and led the others and told them to wait outside of the doors just to make sure whatever was in the room didn't escape. They all nodded and headed out of the room. Brock aimed his light at the door and was stained with blood, dry blood, which meant that other people must have previously died there. He slowly rose the light. There were several other piles of boxes that were stacked higher than his head. It gave the room a maze-like appearance. It was rather disorienting, but Brock was able to keep the bearings about him. "This way," he said, and he slowly began to surely make his way so that he could see the body being dragged, and the others were cautious as they passed by stacks of boxes, making sure that nothing would jump out at them. As soon as they reached and they slowly peered out the stack where Brock and the body had been dragged away, he saw a pair of legs sticking out from behind the other stacks of boxes. Brock recognized the shoes of a person. It was Stacy. "Stacy?" he called out, but no response. He called out again, this time a little louder. Still nothing. "Is she—" Cooper couldn't even finish a sentence. "Only one way to find out," Brock responded. He slowly made his way towards Stacy, vigilantly looking for the unseen danger. If for whatever was responsible for hurting Nina was still in there was no way he was going to leave without making sure he killed it. Lynn was right behind him, practically breathing on his own back. He had to hold out an arm to keep her from getting any closer. He admired the aspiration to help, but there was no way he was going to let anyone get ahead of him. He was the leader, and no one else was going to die on his watch. He was only a few feet away from Stacy before he spoke up again. When he got no response again, he braced himself for what he was about to see. But since he wasn't able to, because as soon as he started to peek from around the stack, a large shape pounced from behind as the same stack and roared. Everyone screamed as Brock stumbled backwards, nearly falling over. He aimed his flashlight and caught a quick glimpse of the culprit. It had green skin, of course, short black hair that resembled a fox hawk, its mustache that mangled inward, glasses with cracked lens. His right arm, it was holding a weird hammer that Brock had never seen before. Brock swore and leapt backwards and let the green swung the hammer down. The teen ended up backing into Lynn, and they both fell backwards. The green began to storm forward, roaring and raising the hammer again. Luna and Cooper quickly helped Lynn up, while Brock struggled to get up. The green began swinging the hammer down. Brock had braced himself. Just then, Speck swung his club and knocked the hammer down out of the greens, and it bounced off a stack of boxes and landed in front of the furious grown-ups. The green had roared and snatched it off the ground, while Speck had helped Brock to his feet. The green lunged at him, but Brock had managed to knock down one of the stacks of boxes into the adult, burying and pinning him to the floor. They seized their chance to escape. They made it outside of the double doors, where Shade and the other 2 kids who waited outside still remained, frozen in place and too scared to run off. "Let's get out of here," Cooper urged. "No," Brock said firmly. "There's only one him and 8 of us. We can handle him better out here." They all heard heavy footsteps rapidly approaching. Angry footsteps, like footsteps you heard from outside your room when a parent was approaching to discipline you. Finally, the green burst through the door, like a Kool-Aid man bursting through the wall. Only instead he had a picture of cherry Kool-Aid he was welding was his bloody hammer. He continued to roar and swing his hammer in circles like it was a sparkler. All the kids screamed and backed up. Even one ran away. Brock stood firm, even though the adult was fury, had no rhyme or reason for his swings. Luna and Lynn recognized the adult. He was the manager of the store, and even in the state of disarray, he had refused to leave the store. It had been his whole life, and he wouldn't let these hooligans ruin it. Brock waited until the green swung his hammer in the direction in front of him, spraying for the attack. The adult wasn't fast enough to react and was taken down with one swing of Brock's bat. An almighty, meaty, metallic bonk had filled the kid's ears as the adult fell. The store was so fond of how now the place was in his demise. Brock had hit him again and again for good measure. It wasn't until the brain matter began to ooze and crushed his skull at the boy was satisfied. They all looked and stared at the corpse. The commotion had died down and was replaced with the sound of everyone's heavy breathing. Speck had stepped forward and picked up the hammer that the adult was holding. His dead green skin still got a hold of it, and Speck had to pry his fingers from it. He studied in the dim light. "Well, there's something you don't see every day," he rather said, amused. "What?" Brock asked. Speck and everyone had the weapon. "Do you know what that is?" "A hammer?" Brock presumed. "Not just any hammer," Speck said. "It's a stunning hammer." "Huh?" Brock and everyone else had confused looks on their faces. Back when people were slaughtering animals on their livestock, they always hit the animals on the heads with these hammers or mallets to knock them unconscious before doing the deed. Everyone winced. "That's sick," Luna said. Speck shrugged. He couldn't deny on how messed up it was, but at the same time it reminded him of how it was before the world changed. Everyone would just have to buy and consume meat products without even thinking about the ultimate price for what was said in products. It was something everyone blocked out of their heads. Just like no like to think of the famine, disease, or wars at different countries. If it wasn't affecting them, they didn't care. Only now no one cared. No one could turn a blind eye and ruin anything more. If they did it, it could very well cost them their own lives. "So you're saying this man was slaughtering kids like cattle?" Brock asked. "It definitely looks that way." Everyone just stood frozen. This was just another grim reminder of the world they lived in. No matter what, they could be nothing but prey to the adults. Only the way they changed that is to kill them before they kill themselves. They were slaughtered. "Let's go check on the others," Brock said. He was doing his best to keep his voice firm. He walked away and the others followed. Speck reminded him of the back of the group. He took one last look at the tool of his hand and then threw it aside. Up at them in front of the store, they met two kids, plus the one who ran off earlier, standing in front of Nina, looking at the girl pitifully. But an open, unused first aid kit lay next to them. "What are you doing?" Brock asked the kids. "Don't just stand there, help her." "We can't," one of them simply said. "She's dead." "How do you know?" "We just do," another one answered. He didn't sound too upset when he spoke, just disappointed. After all the death they had seen, a lot of them had grown indifferent to it. Brock swore and shoved them aside. He checked for Bria for a pulse, and sure enough there was none. It was a quiet few seconds before Shade broke the awkward silence. "What should we do?" Brock then stood up and sniffed the body before finally speaking. "Help me get her body in the cart. Then we will go retrieve Stacy's body and try to find Bria's. We'll bury them when we get back. But first we have to get this shopping done." Luna and Lynn looked at each other and they want to help Brock recover the bodies. No doubt they hugged their siblings a bit tighter when they got back to the school. 12-year-old Roxy Townsend ran through the streets of her destroyed forlorn. Tears were traveling across her face, past her ears, because of how fast she was running. It all had happened so fast. One minute she and her friends were all free, feeling truly alive for the first time of over a month. No adults had been spotted for days. They had plenty of food and little activates to get them through the day. Everyone was getting along with their small bar that she and her fellow survivors had managed to stay holed up in. But those teenagers, those monsters had ruined everything. They had come out of nowhere, slaughtered everyone without hesitation or remorse. Which just left her. She managed to barely slip up a few past them without being noticed, but with a pack of adults that appeared out of nowhere, Her cover was blown. Now she was being chased by a group of angry teens and a pack of hungry adults. Roxy wasn't wearing any shoes when the teens had attacked, and all she had on her feet was a pair of socks that were now dirty, filled with holes at the bottom. Her soles were all cut up from the running on the sidewalks and pavement, and her sides were hurting from all the running that she had been doing at the last couple of minutes. She stopped and caught her breath as soon as she was sure a good distance away from her pursuers. Resting the back against the mailbox, which she panted as quietly as she could. Afraid that any breath would alert the monster from her position, she shut her eyes tight and managed to fight back the bile that was rising in her stomach. She took some more breaths and thought about her visions of her friends being slaughtered. The panic in her chest began to rise again as she finally felt to need to start running again. Run! That was all Roxy could do. Run away and get as far from this place as people as possible. She broke into another sprint and round a corner from the shop and suddenly filled her body with a tired vision of a sharp stinging pain that filled her stomach. She let out a small gasp as her legs went limp. Before she could collapse to the ground, the body in front of her grabbed her arm with one hand to keep her from falling and stepping back. She looked up to see a pale, grinning face looking down at her. It was a boy 16 by the looks of it, which would be possible. Roxy's group had deduced, and the deceased affected people over the age of 15, turning their skin to sickly green color. So either this kid was older than he looked, or he was somehow immune to whatever the grown-ups turned into. He had shaved head, dark brown eyes, and he was wearing dark long clothing. He leaned in and whispered, "Didn't run fast enough." Roxy then looked down and saw that she'd been stabbed. The older boy had removed the large knife for her and let her fall to the ground. Tears were flowing fleetly from the scared, injured girl as the older teen wiped the blade on her pants, then put it back on his staff. He then grabbed Roxy and by the hair and began to drag her away. The girl could do nothing but stare up at the sky as lines of darkness began to circle her vision and swallowed it up into the black hole, which it did. Roxy had only known the bliss of the abyss for a few precious moments before she felt herself being lifted up and slammed down in some metallic. It sounded like a car hood, and Roxy gave out a small cry, but was still powerless to move. She all wanted this to be over. She heard what sounded like a steel barking in the distance, which was weird because they didn't live near a zoo. Suddenly more teens were looking down at her. All of them just had sinister looking ones that stabbed her. Some stepped aside with a girl with brown hair, hazel eyes, appeared just as looking down at Roxy with those that seemed to display sympathy. Roxy just looked at her with sure pleading eyes. The girl lifted her hand and rubbed Roxy's cheek with the back of the hand like a mother would do to a sleeping child. Roxy whimpered, but the girl just softly hushed her. "Don't worry, sweetie. It'll be over soon." The 12-year-old heard the sound of something being scribbled on paper, then heard a boy who stabbed her asked if someone was writing it down. Whatever it was, "Yeah, I'm done," the person responded. "Good," the boy with the shaved head said. He turned his attention back to Roxy. Without missing a beat, he took out his machete and brought it down on Roxy's neck. The little girl was conscious, aware of her head being rolled down of the hood of the car and being slammed down to the ground. She blinked a few times, her vision becoming blurry from tears, and she wanted to bring a hand up to wipe them away, but she couldn't feel anything from the neck down. And then she couldn't feel or see anything at all.